All right, so there's a handful of you that already did this assignment. You may get value out of doing this again, but you could also complicate things a little bit by putting a second dollar bill on here.
That's funny.
I do think that, okay, there we go. Let's see. So those of you that find that are doing this project again, you can complicate it by adding another bill on top. Another way to complicate it, actually the correct term would be to problematize it. Another way to problematize the assignment is you could have $1 bill and put a big piece of tape on it, or two pins on it, and then you have to render the pins, or putting another dollar bill like I just did, or replacing this with a $10 bill so that you're having to paint a different subject. Those of you doing this assignment for the first time, you could ignore what I'm doing right now, and you could check out the demonstration video later when you have a chance to see how it continued. I probably won't have a chance to get us all the way through this first step now that I'm sort of adding this element to it. But, it's a painting, so you change it at any time you want. You make dramatic, different, big changes to a painting.
Question. I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Does the order that you pick, like yellow and then cadmium yellow and then red and then green, does that order that we have to follow, or is it just based on our objective seeing to see which area is more green or more red or more orange compared to the other?
No, this is part of so when we start a painting, we could start with an underpainting, or we can start alla prima where we go directly into trying to make a one-day painting, right? Those are the two options. Maybe there's other options. But if you're going to do an underpainting, there's a lot of different ways to do an underpainting. This is just one way to do an underpainting. The colors I'm choosing have nothing to do with the subject. In fact, if you don't want to paint a dollar bill, like if you're a student that already took this class and you don't want to you don't want to paint a dollar bill because you didn't like it last time, you could paint a postcard instead, or any flat image. The idea is that we're trying to create the illusion of a flat image on a flat surface. So the colors I'm using have nothing to do with my subject, because if you were using a photograph or a postcard and you were doing the same assignment, you would do the same thing. The point of doing these in the order that I have, or that we're doing them in, is to better familiarize yourself with the properties of each color. Some colors are more transparent, some colors are more opaque, some colors are warmer, some are cooler. And so really what it is, it's a combination of teaching you or not teaching you, but learning or familiarizing ourselves with the prismatic palette. So if you've never worked with a full prismatic palette, it would be helpful there. But it's also, again, like I said, helpful to learn some of these other paint properties. That's why those that are painting in oil paint will get the most out of this process. And then the other people maybe get a little less out of it.
Thank you.
That being said, if you don't want to start your painting with this process, you want to jump right into a process that you're a little bit more familiar with, you absolutely can. Um, I went up a mountain because I decided to go up a different path, and now I got to will the painting back into working order. In the second pass, so to complete the first pass, you go through all the colors, and you're going to end up with some kind of brownish prismatic underpainting. And in the second pass is when you're going to try to mix the actual local colors that you see. Whoops, dipping in the wrong color. That's where you're really trying to pay attention to the colors you're seeing. Right now, we're more focused on like placement, drawing, and value. Right now, it just so happens to look similar in colors to the referent. That's only because I'm in the green. As I get into the blues and purples, it'll start to look significantly different. So the last of the lighter colors that I haven't used is my cerulean blue. there's certain things I know that I can't deal with right now that I'll deal with later. So for example, here I'm able to retrieve the white, the little like line here on the edge. Here it's gone. It's in there. Knowing that I'm just going to carve that out later when I work with my local colors. I'll carve it out by meaning I'm going to paint it white, right? I'm going to carve it out of the dark. Again, feel free to ask questions as necessary because otherwise I end up getting quiet and I start to go into the zone and then I forget that I'm supposed to be talking to, providing some kind of idea about what I'm doing, thinking about. I start to concentrate a little too much.
Is there a name for this particular technique?
No, this is before everything started getting codified and put into categories and tutorials, etc. This is a Wayne Thiebaud teaching instruction. It doesn't have necessarily a specific name. I refer to it as um, traveling around the color wheel painting. Um, but I don't know that it has a specific name or process. I would call it just a kind of standard underpainting. It's just that you're using all the colors as a learning strategy, right? That being said, when Wayne Thiebaud would start a painting, he would start with, colors that you didn't see there. And that's why in the end, his paintings have a lot of color. And you'll see even the edges of forms in his paintings will have the repeated colorful lines, etc. But it doesn't have I'm sure someone's going to pick up on it and then they're going to give it a name and then they're going to start a YouTube account and they're going to have subscription service that you can pay for and then you
Yeah.
could go. Again, in the end, it's just really about creating an underpainting that's teaching you along the way. Um, it's not like a special technique or anything. You could start off if you wanted to with any color on underpainting. I do think that the more colorful your underpainting, the more color your painting will end up in the end, more color in the end. That being said, there are plenty of great tonal painters. I also like people like Lucian Freud, painters who are less colorist and um, more tonal painters. But I don't know if it's my Mexican American or Chicano background where we have a lot of color in Mexico, or my natural inclinations, but I prefer more color than less. And there are some like inherent biases against color, cultural biases that are interesting. So I also read about and do research on color. But there isn't like a specific, it's not like a special technique or anything, I would say. It's the learning technique. So that red sort of neutralized into a lot of those other colors, which is good because sometimes the red layer can really sort of take over. It's such an intense, strong color. But I probably have a little bit too much Gamsol on my surface, which is why it's making it less like scumbly and a little bit more smeary. But I don't have a lot of paint on there, so I'm able to still get that sort of scumbly approach. I gotta scumble that red into some of these other areas. Again, just scumbling this red into it because I went into the blue, so I went backwards. Also a good reminder that, we're painting with mud, right? We're color, so much of the color that we experience now in the world is not real color, right? It's digital. It's light that we're looking at. What we might call well, and so when we add light all together, we get white, right? So when we're dealing with computer, we're talking about white light as opposed to paint. When we add all the colors together, we get like a brown or a gray or a mud, what we call sometimes mud color. And it's just a good reminder that that's what we're painting with, right? We're painting with minerals. Well, if we're painting with oil paint, we are. Sorry. If we're painting with acrylic, you're painting with plastic. But if you're painting with oil paint, you're painting with oil, minerals, dirt, substances.
What is water soluble oils
I
made
don't
of?
know. I don't actually know. That's an interesting question. I should look at that.
I
Never.
don't, I don't, I only use water soluble. I mean, I have oil, but it's so hard to clean up afterwards.
Yeah, I agree. The cleanup is definitely the barrier. I agree.
Yeah.
No, I got my other roll of chalk towels. I gotta go get more.
But if you paint, so I mostly paint with the water soluble oils.
Mhm.
But if I was like seriously going to do a portrait of some family member or something, how easy would it be for me to shift to the oil?
I don't know that it would be easy because and this would maybe if you wanted to, you could do this would be a good assignment in oil because this entire underpainting process is all about the properties of oil paint. And so
Mm.
just in doing this underpainting, you're building miles
Mhm.
in a very simple exercise because you're having to, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You're doing this 9 times the same
Mhm.
drawing with the different paints. And so you're getting a good
Right.
amount of paint experience with oil
I
paint.
bet.
So you familiarize yourself with the sort of slipperiness of
Mhm.
oil paint, which is significantly different than water-based. There's a kind of oily slipperiness.
Mhm.
And you'll see that, it resists sometimes, or you're painting and then it pulls up off the canvas, pulls the layer underneath off the canvas,
Mhm.
etc. I don't know if you've noticed, but I keep returning to this one spot when I come back to I could start off with the outline, but I think the main reason I come back to this one spot is because one of our painting sort of rules, which you eventually then go break later, is reestablishing your darks. And this is the darkest area, this shadow shape that happens around Mr. Washington here is sort of our darkest area in the entire dollar bill. And so it helps to reestablish our drawing. The darks sort of function is like weights. They help us create sort of like a gravity, but it also helps us sort of pin the drawing back down. If that makes sense. Anybody see any good painting shows lately?
No. Oh,
Does anybody here ever participate in the Laguna Woods community juried show?
no.
You should. I've juried that a couple times. It's really fun. I had a good time during that. I used to jury the OC Fair too, but I haven't done that in a few years.
I wouldn't know what to do to enter something like that. How much work is involved?
Usually I think there's just like a little application fee and then you just upload the images or submit them. I think that's how they did it last year.
Oh, nice.
But, it just depends on the application fee, in my opinion. I also suggest holding your brush far back when you're working on your paintings. If you have a shaky hand, don't worry about it. Let that shaky hand be in the painting. Some people like to use a mole stick, where you have a stick that goes across and you lean your hand on it to steady your hand. I actually like a little bit of a wobbliness in the paint marks.
What size brush you are using, Christian?
For this, I'm using I think it's just a 1. Yeah.
One
Around 1.
round one. Thank you.
I like rounds for drawing this type of thing.
Mhm.
But my favorite brush is or my most versatile brush is a filbert. You guys ever paint with an Egbert?
Nope.
Egberts are fun to paint with. You lose control. This is a different version of an Egbert because it's fancy. It has the sides here, which normally they don't have the sides, but an Egbert is just a filbert that's really long. And this one is interesting because it has this was actually given to me as a gift by my mentor in my MFA program, which is why it's not used. But this one has a little these side things that keep it from being as wobbly. But one of the things I like about an Egbert is usually they don't have these side supports. And so the wobbliness of it is what's actually really interesting. It kind of makes a mark like what the name sounds like. Like if you said, "Oh, that's an Egbert mark," and then you looked at the mark, you'd be like, "Yeah, it's very egg. That does look Egberty."
So on this, can you go back and redo your layers, or do you like to just start with the light, go to the dark, and then don't go back?
Well, for this process, what we do is we go through all the colors, no matter how it's looking. You're correcting along the way with all the different colors, but in the end, and you'll see that even in the demo, the colors are going to look different than this one because each time you do it, the colors are going to be different in the end.
Huh.
In fact, after this, I can probably I have some of my other demos sitting on the shelf back there. I'll go grab it and I'll show you how each one looks a little different. And it's because it's all a matter of how much, like, so for example, this one's a lot darker than a lot of my other ones because I wanted to add that second dollar bill, right? So it sort of changed the whole layering. Um, but some of you might accidentally use too much red. And so in the end, your painting might look more reddish. Some might use you know, um, more red and green. In the end, your painting looks very brown. So in the end, everybody's underpainting is going to look a little different. And every time you do this underpainting, like I said, I've done this painting maybe a dozen, no, not a dozen, like maybe 8 times for students. And every time it looked different. Sometimes they're more accurate even, like sometimes my proportions are off more than others. Like sometimes I'm stretching that dollar bill, like we all are. And then other times I accidentally smash it too much. And these are things to be aware of, like for example, I'm very aware of the fact that when I paint portraits, I have a tendency to make the nose too long. And so when I paint a portrait, I'm very cautious and I try to be very aware of that and make those corrections. But the point is, this painting will look different each time you do it.
Mhm.
I'm going to step out for a minute. I need to go get another more of my rolls of paper, so I'll be right back. Also, my camera starts to shift after a while. Yeah. Those of you that took this class last semester, are you finding it easier to see the painting this time? Hello?
I wasn't here last time, so I don't know.
If
Yeah.
there's anybody there that recognizes it or not.
Yeah, first time for me too. I've been doing it along with you, and it's pretty muddy right now, but I'll do it again.
Yeah, mine's muddy too. And the final painting is gonna be muddy. In fact, it's not really muddy, it's just that it's not clear, right? Like
Right.
I think it was Richard Schmid that said there's no such thing as a muddy color, just a color that's in the wrong spot. And so right now it's just an underpainting, and so it's okay that things are a little wonky because we're gonna, you know, eventually get to painting this all in its local color, and all of that'll change.
Oh,
Right? This is just an underpainting, right? We could start an underpainting as some teachers teach black and white underpaintings, right? Like have you work in monochromatic or achromatic. And I'm just fundamentally against a black and white underpainting. I'm also against a brown underpainting. And when I paint a still life, which we'll get into later, for my own pleasure or for my own research, I don't use any underpainting. I go right away and I start to try to paint what I'm seeing.
mm-hmm.
I try to get to my destination as fast as I can and then make corrections. All right, I'm gonna go to, or did I scumble in my Oh, I gotta scumble in my blue. Oh, that cerulean blue is very strong. The cerulean blue is mixing in with that yellowish background and making it look very green. It's even more exaggerated on the screen. It doesn't look as crazy as I'm looking over at the laptop and it looks pretty wild. Doesn't look that wild. Like this is not, it's not as luminous up here as it looks on the screen. Well, once we scumble in that dark red, it's gonna knock that all down again. All right, so got two more colors, my ultramarine and then my purple. Ultramarine is lighter than purple. Purple should be the darkest color, or at least very close. Anybody watching any good television these days?
There's a good portrait class on Netflix. Has anybody seen that? It's about finding the best portrait artist. It's a
Oh,
competition like Top Chef.
I saw that. My students recommended it to me last semester, or they mentioned it. I don't know if they recommended it to me. Because then they might have known that it was I was gonna have strong opinions about it.
Oh, you do?
Well, I think it's an interesting experiment of a show.
Yeah.
But why don't you tell me what do you think? What do you like about it?
Oh, I just liked watching the different processes of how they approach the portrait itself. And I've only seen two episodes, and one of them was a young boy and how he approached the subject
Yeah.
and started painting, and everyone does it differently.
Yeah, and I think in my opinion, that's the best thing about that show.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the ones that were more feeling like projected feeling not so perfect were the ones that were more people wanted to buy or
Uh,
keep.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely like that there's a show that seems to be pretty popular about painting. And I do know that those Top Chef shows and stuff did quite a bit to improve cuisine in America. From what I've read, um, they were that type of reality show is highly influential in the development of American food culture.
Mhm.
So maybe it could revitalize the art of painting, although painting still remains pretty popular. Um, I guess I hesitate about a show like that because what is it called again?
Um, I forgot something like the world's best paint portrait artist or something. I could look it up.
And I get that part of it is like the title is intended to be, have a certain kind of sensational quality so that people tune in. But I guess I may be like hesitant about the idea that there's a show that could find the idea of ranking painter like art like that is,
Yeah.
and not that that's new, right? Like that's there's portrait competitions and there's, like I was just saying, juried exhibitions, and so it's not like it's not a new idea.
It's
What?
called Portrait Artist of the Year
That's
on Netflix. Yeah.
Oh, I tried watching that once.
Is that the one that's on the BBC?
Yes, it's British.
They have a landscape version too.
ah. Do they actually paint out in the landscape then?
Yeah, they usually go out to these British estates and paint there. I mean, I understand what you're saying about it's really interesting to see how everybody else paints and how they approach it, but the quote unquote experts are just so subjective, you
Mhm.
know, about where they're coming from, who wins. So that part I don't like as much as just watching people choose their composition and how they approach the painting.
Right.
Yeah, that sounds like the fun part about it. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, I'm gonna give it another shot. I'm gonna try the landscape one too. It's starting to look more and more like $1 again. So I was definitely in the weeds there when I decided to sort of jigger the entire painting by adding second dollar bill there. But I think it's also important to remember that, we don't have to be too precious with our paintings, right? Like we can make dramatic changes when we need to, and even if as scary or as much as we might not want to. Sometimes it's for the better, and then later you don't regret making that move. Other times you don't make those changes, and then later you regret that you didn't do something that you maybe should have done that would have changed the direction of the painting. Um, but I also think all of those changes like adds to the history of the painting. The hard part is like, how do you not like destroy the painting through that how do how do you keep a painting fresh and alive through
Right.
your changes like that?
True.
Christian, I have a question for you.
Yes.
It seems like this that you are painting on is not a canvas. Is this a paper? Oh, it is a canvas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
I
with
don't know why.
for these demos, I buy the Blick Art Supplies has like the multi-packs. I think it's like 7 in a pack.
Uh-huh.
And it's only like, I think it's like $25 for 7 canvases. They're not
Uh-huh.
great canvases, they're kind of cheap. And when I make my own paintings, I don't use I stretch on my own canvases when I make my own paintings. But for the
Okay.
demonstrations, these are fine for this type of purpose.
Right. Could you paint on some kind of paper? Also acrylic paint on some kind of paper?
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
watercolor paper, but those thick one?
I would paint on what are you painting with? What kind of paint?
No, the acrylic. I am coming from background of watercolor.
With
So,
acrylic, you can paint on almost any thick paper surface because it's acrylic. It's not going to do anything to your paper because it's acrylic paint is just plastic. So you don't have the same issues like if you were painting with oil paint, but they do make, well, it looks so weird. Like when I look at the screen, it looks very weird, this painting. In real life, I wish the painting looked like it looks like on that screen. It's very strange. But with oil paint, yeah, you have to take into consideration the oil factor, right? And so then it becomes an issue. But with acrylic paint, you could paint on Bristol, you could paint on a watercolor paper, you could paint on canvas, you could paint on wood, you could paint on canvas paper, you could paint on arches paper. It's just as long as it's thick enough that it can take the liquid element,
yes.
the wetness.
So are you suggesting, or is it okay that for practice, I am using watercolor paper,
Yeah,
those with
I think
the,
I think it'll be fine. You just might find that after you do that one, you're like, it's going to be up to you if you liked how it worked when you did it.
uh-huh,
Like
okay.
if you do the first one and you found that it was kind of a struggle to work on that paper, then you would probably
Mhm.
try a different paper.
Okay.
Because I think
I
that's more of a question of like personal preference.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Like for example, if you wanted to in this class, people painting in oil paint, you could paint um on panel on wood. I personally don't like it.
Mm.
I don't like that. I don't like that the wood doesn't absorb the paint at all. I like a little bit of absorption. I don't like that the oil sits on the surface of the wood panel. I like the paint to feel a little bit more integrated into the substrate. I don't like how slippery a panel is. Um, as opposed to like you speaking of watercolor, Yupo paper, which is very slippery, but I like that one for
Mhm.
its slipperiness, but because it kind of functions differently. Have you ever painted watercolor on Yupo paper?
No.
Yupo paper is like a synthetic paper from Japan, and it's originally made for for acrylic. I mean, sorry, for watercolor.
Mhm.
But it works great because it's plastic. It works great as an oil painting surface or acrylic surface too. So you could even play with that.
Yes. Thank you for
So
the
feel free
idea.
to experiment with different surfaces that you might like more than others when it comes to the acrylic paint.
I love that. I've tried Yupo and watercolor, but never oil. I'm
Yeah,
gonna try that.
it definitely I wouldn't. I think you want to paint a little bit more like watercolor with it. I wouldn't paint very thick.
Mm.
You want to have more diluted, like treat it a little bit like the oil paint, a little bit more like watercolor. But it's not
Mm.
the same, obviously with oil paint you can add on top of, right? Whereas with the watercolor you really can't.
Yeah, it's really fun, crazy stuff, that Yupo.
Yes, that's really interesting. Um, could even do like I've seen people experiment quite a bit with Yupo paper, like using it as a relief kind of medium.
Mm.
All right, our
Wonder
last
how the dollar bill, wonder how the dollar bill would come out.
I would say I would approach it very slowly and watered
Mhm.
down. All right,
Hmm.
this is our last color here.
What color is that?
This is my purple that I mixed.
Oh, I already did purple.
So you moved through
Whoops.
them all. Well, it was nice. You weren't also talking at the same time. So
Yeah, no, but I went ahead of you. I'm sorry.
no, absolutely. Feel free. You guys should work at the pace that feels comfortable for you. If you find that the pace of the class is a little too slow, I could always give you an additional assignment to speed it so that you feel that you have adequate work to do. But also don't hesitate to do your own painting projects and email them to me or upload it to the discussion. Last semester we had a couple people doing that where they were working on the in-class painting, but then they also had other works they were working on, so they would occasionally put them into the discussion board because I think other people hearing feedback on that work would also help them.
Great.
So I try to be as flexible, but I do got to have some kind of structure just so I know what I'm doing each week.
Yeah.
But I try to remain flexible. So if there are people who really, really do not want to do the assignment that we have, I don't want you to feel tortured. So just email me and I'll give you something else to do.
So that canvas that you just were talking about, this one that you are working with now,
Mhm.
you don't gesso it or anything before you get started. You just start painting on the store-bought canvas.
On this one, I did because the surface is good enough for
Mm-hmm.
what I'm painting.
Okay.
As a student, when I work with my students, because I also teach at Laguna College of Art and Design, They're very serious students because they all want to be professional painters when I work with
Mhm.
students I'm working with. So if they buy store-bought, like mechanically produced manufactured, like these cheap canvases, get it. But like, then I definitely do recommend they put another layer.
Okay.
But I don't have any absorption problems with these. They're actually decently gessoed because the main issue with sometimes when you have those cheap canvases is that the gesso is like a cheap gesso, so it just absorbs all the oil out right away.
Mhm.
And I haven't had too much of the bleed through on the back on
Mm.
these.
Oh,
Occasionally,
wow. They'd even do that, huh?
if they're that's why they recommend
Wow.
putting that extra layer of gesso, because if there's not
Okay.
if and all these companies are trying to put as little money into the products as possible, right?
Sure. Yes, everything's shrinking and getting cheaper.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually just looking at an article where, anyways, that's a totally different stuff. Never mind.
I know
I get
you
this
can get
last.
really go down the
Yeah, I'm gonna
rabbit
change
hole
that
on
here
that one.
before we get into some deep combos there.
I have a question, please.
Yes.
So as you're adding each layer of paint in the different colors you move along, are you trying to apply it in specific areas, or are you going through the same motion of the same places to paint over before? Do you know when?
Essentially, yeah, basically what I'm doing is just redrawing it each time, right? Like almost like if it's a pencil, right? Like, I've been redrawing it, and then every time I scumble, it blurs it out again, and then I got to redraw it. And then I scumble and it blurs it out again, and I got to redraw it, right?
We're,
So
we're, we're not trying to find like different shades of color in this process,
I think you want it
dark
to be
versus
close.
light.
I think more important than color is value at this point. We're thinking more about value, right? So like, I'm not really I'm not making this darker because then this is the lighter area. So I'm keeping this area lighter, but I am scumbling through it, but trying to keep it lighter. That's why I was saying earlier, like when I come back, every time I come back to this dark area first, because this is the biggest dark shape that I have. Um, and it reinforces the drawing. And then from here, it's like I got this here, and then I got the United States of America up here. So really what I'm doing is I'm just drawing and refining the drawing over and over. There were times where I had to correct. I had an edge that was too far out and I moved it in. So really what you're trying to do is just draw with paint at this point. So it's like draw with the color, then scumble with the color previously. Draw with the next color, scumble with the color previously. Draw with the next color. So it's really a little bit more like drawing at this stage, because I'm not trying to match exactly what I see. That's the second stage. Because once this dries, I have everything in place, right? It's like an underpainting. And now the first thing we do next week is I'm going to try to paint that cardboard the right color, because I can't paint the dollar bills the right color until I have the cardboard the right color, because it's all
Hmm.
relative, right? If I start trying to paint the dollar bills on a colorful background like this, well, I don't know what values and colors, because everything I put on here is going to be in relationship to what's around it, right? That's Color Relativity by Joseph Albers. And so once this is dried up, it'll be dry by next week on Tuesday. Theoretically, I haven't decided that I'm going to do that next week, but then I would come in here and I would paint the background as close as I can get to the brown of the cardboard. Then I would start to paint the dollar bills as close as I can get to the dollar bills up there. And generally, this usually takes 3 passes. This first pass, then a second pass of local color, and then a final pass where we refine it, where it's like, okay, well, is the drawing need to be refined? Is the value scale, the value relationships right, etc. So this painting usually takes a minimum of 3 passes. The first pass, we're not as interested in the accuracy of color. We're interested in the accuracy of values, although there's no adding white, right? So that's what I was saying earlier, right? This value right here is too dark, but I'm not using white right now. There's no white on this pass, so I can't make that value correct yet. I'm going to have to wait. to the next pass. And then when I mix the color, the general color, and I'm going to show you how I do that. I make a large pool of the local color, and then using that large pool of color, I create offshoots for the variations of that color. And you'll see that next week, or you get a sneak peek by looking at the demonstration on YouTube. In fact, after this, you should all look at the rest of the demonstration on YouTube before, and then you can get started on your painting if you didn't already. And then that way, next week, everybody will have seen the YouTube video. Those of you that were enrolled last semester, you already saw it at IRL. Well, kind of. You saw it in real time, but not in real life, actually.
And a question, the dollar bill, can it be almost the right size, or can it be a little smaller? Does it matter?
I would try to make it life size or a little bigger. If you go a little bit smaller, it's going to end up a lot smaller.
Okay.
Will we be using white eventually or no?
In the second pass, yeah.
Oh, okay. I just have a hard time with the scumbling.
Yeah, see, that's good. That means the practice will be helpful.
Yes.
As long as by the last pass, you can see your underpainting. Combo my ultramarine blue. Well, this garage is warm.
Yeah.
Uh,
And earlier I caught a mosquito
ooh.
right on my arm too. I'm like, it's not a.
Really?
I thought I left all those mosquitoes when I left Michigan, but apparently not.
And we're doing scumbling because we don't want to totally blend the colors together.
Exactly, right? If you didn't scumble, if you did like a full brush over, your drawing would disappear because it's still like a little wet, right? It's a little, whoops. Those of you with acrylic or water solubles will probably have less of that problem. So I guess in that way, you have an advantage. Got to scumble a little bit into the dollar bill and we're all set. Yeah, you'll notice that when I've been scumbling, for example, like right now I'm scumbling this blue. If I went over what I just drew, it would disappear it. Or I mean, erase it, disappear it. And so I generally scumble in the other areas and around what I just drew. But I allow it to hit the edges so that I don't have any hard edges from what I just drew. Okay, and now I'm going to try to change the angle of viewing so you can see maybe the canvas with a little bit less. I think it's the glare that's creating some of that interesting sort of color effects. It's kind of got a lot of glare on it.